What's up, y'all? We're back for another episode of Youth During COVID. Today we're going to really just talk about education and me and Rachel will be talking about our different school environments, what's it like during COVID, etc. So really, yeah. So we'll just start with the first question. Rachel, really quick, do you like describe your school and its environment?
Oh yeah. So the name of my school is called It's a private school in Oakland. There isn't a lot of. I mean, there is a lot of diversity in the attendance of Asians, but not a lot of black and brown kids at our school, so it's slightly isolating. But there's a lot of people are generally super nice. There's not a lot of. It's not a super like aggressive environment. It's competitive in academics, so that's kind of toxic. But overall, it's not that bad socially.
Yeah, and can you tell the audience what you told me about the rankings of your school?
Oh yeah, so we're the number one private school in California. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's definitely some weight behind the name.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. Yeah, but how was the like what is your school known for? What is the reputation of your school in like Oakland in your area?
Um, a lot of people perceive the school to be very nerdy, and there is a huge emphasis on academics, which is true. But you definitely do find a variety of people there. It's not just everyone is working all the time, working on schools all the time, um, and doesn't have any sort of social life. We are a social school. We're not that good at sports, um, but there definitely is a balance between um, academics and play. It's just you have to know how to handle the workload you get, or it's going to be super rough.
Yeah, real quick, do they like ask or like do they help you guys like manage your workload and your time management skills, etc.? Or you just have to come in with that to college prep?
Um, on some level, I do think that the teachers expect you to already know how to manage your time. There's definitely support services that our school has. Like last year, she left sadly, but this lady Sarah Durantini, she was head of learning services, and you could meet with her to kind of schedule a breakdown of your week. And so you know like what you have to do when and plan out any major assignments. So there's definitely ways for like myself where I never really learned time management skills in middle school for me to catch up and be on par with other people there.
My school, Emory High. Charles, who was with us, also went to Emory High.
You went out just for a second. You want to start over, good brother? Did he freeze on your side too, Rachel?
Yeah, he did.
Okay, you start over for us, B.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you good? Go ahead.
So to introduce like my school and its environment, well, I go to Emory High, and which is the school that Charles went to for 3 years, and uh, this environment is really just how to explain this. Like I love Emory High. It's a majority black and brown students. There's white kids, very few, and Arabs. Um, so it's diverse. Like in a sense, I'll say it's becoming more diverse too. Um, it's in a like a majority white city, which is pretty interesting. The fact that it is in like Emeryville, which is a place with multiple businesses like Pixar and Cliff Bar, and there's like a lot of big corporations around my school, and it's interesting because most of the students like who go to Emeryville High School do not live in Emeryville. They're coming from Oakland or like Antioch or Richmond or just outside of Emeryville, the city, and it's Emeryville's in a unique situation, I'll say. Um, in terms of academics, I feel like it is. I feel like they're. I like it to a certain extent. I like their academics. And they're known for what they're known for. a lot of people don't know what Emory High is, which is kind of funny. Because every time like they like drive past it, they like, oh yeah, that's Emory High, you know. But essentially, it's really known for just kind of being there. Honestly, now
It's not just known for that.
it's not.
You gotta know the history of where you go, brother. It's I mean,
Yeah.
I would say this about Emory. I'm super proud to be an alum of Emory. I love that school, and even when I started Energy Converters, which was meant for Oakland students and Oakland high schools, you know, I was really adamant about having it. One, because I went to Emory, and two, about 50% each year since I was a student before. At least 50% of those kids have been from Oakland, have been Oakland kids or whatnot, and their parents wanted a smaller school kind of experience, and it's kind of nestled away. And you may not know this because I don't know if it's the same anymore, but the school that you go to, Rachel, was in our basketball league. So we played them twice a year, and it was always an interesting game. We mostly won, but it was definitely but it would be interesting for us when we would go to that school, because we went to a school that has a lot of money, that had a lot of resources, and we would like walk around and just be like bugged out, because it's like, yo, y'all got about the same amount of kids we got, but there's so much more space, there's so much more like different facilities or whatnot. So I guess what I think people watching might be curious of, now that we're in these COVID times,
Yeah.
what are some characteristics of both of your schools that were, you know, pretty prevalent? And then how do you think those things might change post-COVID? So Rachel, why don't you, like, I mean, you talked a little bit about your school, and just make sure again you say, you know, your name and what your school is, where your school is again, and what grade you're in. And then we can kind of get into pre-COVID and then post-COVID.
Yeah, okay, so I go to college prep. I'm going into the 12th grade. So pre-COVID, my school's an outdoor campus, pretty much. It's an open campus, so anyone technically can come and walk on the campus. There's no, like, it's not a closed off campus like Emory is. And I mean, so we have different buildings. We have a math building, history, social science, and English buildings. And so you pretty much just walk around and go to your classes. Our class sizes back then were about 16 students per class, give or take. And we go by a block schedule, so A through G. And you normally have a free period during that time to catch up on work or go down to College Avenue and get something to eat. So, I mean, it was pretty flexible pre-COVID times.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think it's going to be different when you go back, or
Yeah.
so how are you anticipating it being different?
Well, our school has already released like a COVID plan that I was able to read over, and basically the school ended up renting another campus, which is about half a mile away. So we would just have to walk between our main campus and that campus during times if we are allowed to go back to school. And so how the campuses work is normally, for most of the time, the upperclassmen are going to be on the main campus, and then the underclassmen are going to be on the other campus. And we also added another block schedule, so we have 8 classes a day instead of just 7. And that just allows for us to social distance within our classroom. So we're still able to have class. The biggest change is that, besides that, is that every time before you come into school, you have to do like a wellness check on your phone. So you have to say that you don't have any symptoms of COVID, you're not feeling sick, and you also get a temperature check every time you go to school, and you cannot leave the campus when you're on there. So it's just ways to keep everyone safe.
So Jayden, I think the same question for you, but before we even go to you answering that, I mean, what's your reaction off of what Rachel's experience is, and like them having apps and wellness checks
that's insane. Wait, Rachel, you're going back in person, or?
That completely depends on Alameda County, because as a private school, we're not allowed to go against what the state says. So, I mean, even though we're allowed to have different curriculum than public schools, it depends on what the governor says or whether or not Alameda County is clear to have school again.
Yeah, got you. But in terms of apps, that's insane. Like to have like the wellness checks, like that's pretty cool. Like honestly, um, for my school, really pre-COVID, it was interesting. Our class sizes were relatively small, also. Um, honestly, we have like around 200, 250 students in my school. I was in my junior year, so the classes I took at Emory and the teachers I had, I did like enjoy a lot of them. I feel like they prepped me, a lot uh, for what's to come. They're prepping me a lot as I am. Like I was taking AP classes and whatever. But during the quarantine, it was like I feel like my school kind of had a hard time trying to figure out exactly how to handle that because although it was sudden, like and given the circumstances, I would expect for it to be very difficult to adjust so quickly. But it was at a point where half the school wasn't participating after like the coronavirus started in late March, and it was kind of sad, honestly. We didn't. I know you like when I used to talk to you, like when COVID-19 first started, you were like in classes on Zoom calls. We weren't. We just had assignments to do. So like, how did that work when you were just like you just joined calls and you were?
Yeah, so pretty much, I don't know how Zoom did this, but Zoom pretty much made it so I don't know if it was just for private schools or if there's or if my school had some sort of deal with Zoom, but all of our classes were on Zoom and they were and there's like a certain plan that you can buy from Zoom that allows anyone that has a college prep email to also be granted basic Zoom calls for free.
Yeah.
And so that really helped like with keeping in contact with people and then also having classes. So our schedule changed a little bit. And so, I mean, when COVID first hit, we weren't in class anymore. We just said that, okay, we can't go back to school anymore. And from there, our teachers just so everything was digital. And we would come into class maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And besides that, we just have work to do. But yeah, I mean, school, like classes were still kind of normal. The only difference is that you weren't in person. But I mean, the quality of teaching was, similar. And I was still able to get, to learn from the.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Yeah, they were like very it was like once a week that we were required to get on a call on a Google Hangout call and talk to like our teachers or whatever. That we were actually like required and we had to do that. And yeah, but there's a huge like percentage of our school who just after the quarantine happened because there are definitely struggling students at my school, and so like I guess the quarantine disabled them academically even more basically, and it's really sad to say, but like just like the fact that only like half of the people really like actually participated in classes afterwards was just like that's just insane to me. But yeah, that it's cool that you was like to continue on as normal. I feel like that's pretty nice.
Yeah, I think I think kind of like I guess like a problem I see like with Black youth is just like it's education and there's no really emphasis on getting an education and then seeking a higher degree. So then when I'm in a school like I am now, a private school, these kids have been taught growing up that, oh, you need to get an education, you need to go to a good college, you have to get a good job. And so even though school was put online, to them it was just a slight it was a little shaky for them, but they're going to keep attending school because they were taught that I have to do this in order to get an education. I just wish that same mentality everyone had.
Yeah. There's definitely like a difference in the mentality in which we come into like high school and higher education between like, you know, Black communities and others. But yeah, so were you Rachel? Were you a part of any? Actually, like Charles, do you like briefly talk about how Emory was like during your time there?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I loved Emory. Emory was really small, and you know, I left my senior year because my Coach Bodipo, he didn't get his contract didn't get renewed, and I was wanting to be loyal. And my parents had just moved to Stockton. Even though they moved, I was going to be able to finish out the year with my friends and my basketball team, but I wanted to be in solidarity. But we had a different building than what y'all have. Like this building that y'all have now is kind of like top of the line for, I think, for traditional public schools. I think y'all got one of the best buildings of the public schools, to be honest with you. And so we had like this breezeway, and there was a lot. It just was a lot more activity happening. Like our school wasn't like super bad or anything like that, but we definitely had more fights and more incidents happening than y'all do at y'all school. We didn't have the younger folks on campus the way that you all do now. And sports kind of was a bigger deal when I went there than what it is for you all. So for anybody that plays sports, right? Like I'll see you on game day and you'll be like, oh, I got a game today, right? Like, and just wearing whatever. Like we had to get dressed. We wore ties on game day. We didn't do other stuff. So like when I played basketball, like we were all really serious and trying to get scholarships. So, you know, we didn't do like how you did energy converters and basketball. And like, you'll be like, oh, well, I'll come before practice. Like that just didn't exist. Like when we went, it would be school, study hall, practice, and then a few of us would go lift or practice some more afterwards. So I think that's a little different. I think that y'all are just a different type of student now. I think y'all are more aware about your feelings and like mental health and things like that, when that wasn't really, we had more of a traditional kind of setting in that standpoint. So I would say that's how Emory was different versus like then and now. I think that our young people have just evolved, and you know, y'all look at things very differently than what we did. So I would say that. Can I ask y'all a question real quick? Because I'm curious too, right? Like, and somebody asked, and I wanted to like help you all with this. Somebody was asking about white students at Emory, and it's not Emory, that's the University Emory. Our Emory is spelled Emery. But she asked two questions, and I want to get it out there. Is it important that the white students at Emory are the minority? And what were the consequences of not attending meetings and completing assignments at Emory? So, Jayden, those are a little bit more shaded towards you.
Yeah.
Because Rachel, I know your makeup is a lot different than what Emory's is. So, Jayden, why don't you tackle that question? I'll put it back on the screen for you, and then I'll chime in with you.
Well, in terms of the importance of white students being the minority at Emory, I feel like, well, most of the time, the teacher population isn't going to represent, unless it's a very like African American like area in town. The teacher population is going to represent the school population, and that's the case for us. We have like.
Jayden broke up for a little bit, but I'll jump in with you, Jayden.
We have like
you broke up, Jayden. You broke up when you said, Rachel, what was the last thing he said? He said,
the population of teachers and students are going to reflect each other.
Yeah, the point that he was trying to make is that oftentimes it's going to be more white teachers.
Yeah.
Than statistically what there are white students.
Essentially, yeah. But honestly, I don't like look at that and I'm like, yeah, you know, I just be like, okay, we're just majority Black or majority brown. I just feel like, you know, what we should do, since we're also, the administration is definitely majority Black ran also, even though the teachers are like whiter, usually white in my school, or you know, non-Black. So, but our administration for the most part is Black. So I feel like what we should do is use that as an opportunity to like teach the students like black and brown students who need like a different type of attention, and really like teach them in a different way, essentially, to help like maximize their education.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do white students at Emory High get more of a get special, I guess, preferences than the black students, like by the teachers who are also white?
No, I haven't really experienced any of that, because there's just so many, there's just so many blacks, Mexicans, and Arabs that is just not something like, because like the one white kid in the class being like complimented, we don't think too hard about that. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's not something I've experienced at Emory. It's not really like a huge thing.
I think that's interesting. I guess, and I guess I'll chime in as somebody who works at a bunch of schools throughout Oakland and then visits a lot of schools throughout the country. I actually like the answer that you gave. And Ms. Hunt, thank you for your question. I think it's a good question. But I like the question I like the way you answered it, because growing up, I didn't center whiteness. And I think that the way you answered that question is you didn't center whiteness. Centering whiteness in this circumstance would be thinking about white people even when they're not present in that space. Yeah. That community, that school community, has never been a majority white, even though Emeryville does have a lot of white people that live in it with kids. They tend to have money, and they tend to send their kids to private schools. Oakland, a lot of people don't know, Oakland and the East Bay as a whole have some of the best private schools in the country. And Rachel just talked about that, and her school just high ranked in California. Rachel, your school actually ranks really high amongst the nation, right? So we have people that live in San Francisco and in Marin, in Silicon Valley, that send their kids to private schools in Oakland, right? Whether they're living on campus, if they got that kind of situation, or they commute. But I think that, I like the way that you answered that though, Jayden, because it just means that I think that you've always had a high bar for yourself. And I think that you've always kind of tried to figure out who you are. And I never really seen you following the crowd. So, I think that's a trait that you should definitely keep. But Rachel, let's actually flip that and ask you, right? Like, you go to a school where it's, I don't know the demographic, I can guess it. So why don't you let us know the demographic, and then you can let us know, do you feel that there's an impact of whiteness and money in your school, and people are treated differently?
Yes, most definitely. So my school's a nonprofit, and besides our tuition, we get a lot of our money for operating from donors. Mm-hmm. And there is definitely special treatment between kids whose parents donate a lot of money and kids who don't. Not necessarily in terms of teaching, but definitely when it comes to consequences. So a situation that I can think of is at my school, there is a zero tolerance drug policy. If you're caught with drugs on campus, or any sort of things that alter your mental state, you're basically expelled, or there's going to be some harsh repercussion for doing that. However, a kid was caught drunk at school on campus, and with alcohol in his possession, but because both of his parents were board members and donated a lot of money, he just got suspended for 3 days. And as far as I know, that was his only punishment that he received. And also, our school doesn't ever expel anyone. They always ask them to leave, or things like that, just to keep the school record good and the students, I guess. But there's always some sort of self-interest. So in terms of demographic, there is 32 Black and mixed kids there out of a 360 school population, and so there is definitely you definitely feel isolated for sure, because you don't have any Black educators. We have he's Nigerian. He's our soccer coach, and then our equity and inclusion leader is Black and also our, I guess, like a community arrangement person is also Black. And we don't have any Black teachers, which is definitely a problem. And there's just a lot of there's a lot of things that are just uncomfortable with being Black at my school. Like, we read some books that have the N word in them, and some teachers encourage students to say the N word that are white. And that's happened before. None in my classes, but in last year's class was a really big problem where there was a student that came to school on Halloween dressed as Tupac with like a do-rag on and like a tattoo across his forehead, I think. And that was a really big problem at our school, but it never really got addressed. The student was never punished and kind of just went about his ways. And it was just, it's like you don't feel a lot of support just because there's not that many people that look like you or a lot of people that go through the same experiences. So any sort of problems, you kind of just got to deal with yourself.
That's interesting, man. How does that make you feel? I didn't mean to jump in, but I just go ahead, Jayden. You was probably gonna ask the same thing.
How does that make you feel? That's surprising.
I mean, for me, it's slightly different just because I've always been like a minority at a school. I went to a Christian elementary school, and then I went to a predominantly Asian middle school, and then now I'm at a predominantly white high school. And so I've always been the minority, but I've never felt like as isolated at any other school like I do at CPS, just because at my previous schools, I was either one, too young to care or to notice it, or two, race was never an issue. But at my school, it definitely is, and I mean, the school has kind of gotten better with accepting Black and brown students. But I don't know, it's just I just kind of feel alone sometimes. I mean, I have a good family support system and friend system, so if I'm ever, feeling down, I can always talk to someone. But it's just like having to go there and know that like you're kind of alone because, even though you have other people there that go through the same experiences, administration doesn't really do a lot.
Okay. It says your student, so for 2021, y'all are 51% female, 49% male, 61% self-identify as students of color. Average academic class size is 14 students in the class. Each grade has about 93 students. I think it's interesting though, because they don't disaggregate students of and as self-identify. So, that's an interesting way to hide exactly what those numbers are. Now,
I mean, like especially when I've been looking at colleges, it's like when they say 61% student of color, you can already assume that 70% of that is Asian, and then the other 20% is Hispanic, and then the rest of that, the 10%, is Black or Native American. So it's like, yeah, we have 61 students of color, but the majority of them are Asian, and Asian culture and Black culture definitely not the same in any sort of way.
So, I mean, I think that's interesting. And part of this is, I don't think we talk enough to students that go to private schools. And I also just, your parents have obviously made some decisions and choices for you that they're doing what they think is best for their daughter. And I applaud that. How do you deal with the feelings of loneliness or feeling alone or feeling like there isn't always this racial accountability because you're a minority there?
I don't know. I definitely lean on my parents a lot to deal with it. I mean, also sometimes too, I also feel that I'm isolated from the Black community, which has probably hit me harder than it has, than I've ever experienced in being at college prep, just because now that I go to a school like this, and especially with me being lighter skinned, there's always like an identity crisis. it's like people say the way I talk like a white person, but I'm also too black for the people at college prep. And then they'll respond with, oh, you don't act like a black person. So it's like I don't have a home there, and I don't have a home within the black community either. And so, I mean, like my parents, of course, they grew up during the civil rights movement, or well, my dad did. Um, and with my dad became a doctor, and so he's kind of struggled with the identity crisis too, because when he was going to Berkeley, the Black Panthers were active, and so instead of going out and protesting, he decided to study. And his method of fighting the system was by showing white people in his engineering class that a black person is just as smart. And so it's just it's trying to figure out, like, for me, it's just like kind of where I belong. And I haven't exactly figured that out yet. And so, yeah, I mean, in terms of support, like I said, my parents definitely help me. And I do also have a really close friend network that helps me as well. It's just kind of disheartening sometimes to know that, like, a culture that you've grown up with doesn't always accept you for who you are because of superficial things.
I for the Eight Black Hands podcast, that's the other podcast that I do with 3 other brothers, and they're all over the country. But the topic tonight is that piece around when black students get called acting white or talking white when they're doing well. I probably won't be on this on Sunday's show just because of my birthday. Actually, I'm technically off, but Jayden's show, I could not miss it, supporting my guy Jayden. You heard me giving him an earful about prepping. But I probably won't be on Sunday's show just to kind of have a break. But if they're available, if you're, you should I think they would love to talk to you just about that as somebody who's living it. And if that's something that you'd be interested in, just let me know and I'll tag them. But let me know so I don't want to volunteer you if you're not, available.
No, I'd definitely be down to do that on Sunday.
Sundays at 6 Pacific, 9 Eastern. So that's 6 o'clock your time. So I'll let them know. But I think that's an interesting conversation. And I mean, Jayden, let's just like I said, the fellas are going to talk about that later. So do you want to chime in? Has anybody ever said that you was acting white or talking white?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. 100%. Doing, like, striving to do the things that I do sometimes it's just like, I know some people say it out of jealousy, some people say it out of pain.
Every time he's saying something great, he just freezes.
Notice it.
It's something about Jayden. It's something about when you about to spit that real stuff, you freeze, bro.
I know.
And it's all good. In the next quarter, we're gonna figure out how to up your Xfinity, but we're gonna work on that. But tell me again, when do people say that you acting white or talking white or whatever?
It's really just like, since I'm striving to be parts of, all these programs and striving to do all sorts of different, things, and like a lot of people will see that and they get jealous. Like, people hit me up on, like, bro, you ain't nothing, bro. Like, like everything you do is like nothing. And I'm like, all right. But and some people just like without really thinking about it, they're like, oh, you act like, they don't really think about it. They just say it. They just see something. They just see someone that is like out of ordinary what they see, and then it's immediately it's immediately that conclusion, which is you act white. And yeah, and it's like that is definitely one of the problems, like, in our culture, because it's not like that doesn't discourage me. I don't feel like that should discourage someone, that shouldn't, like, another person's words, especially, like, that's kind of harmless, so I don't think that should discourage you, Rachel, at all. Like when someone says, oh yeah, you talk white or whatever, like, okay, and you definitely just like just keep on doing you. That's how I feel about that.
Yeah, no, I agree. The whole thing about it, though, that I think is like the root of the problem, like I think Charles said earlier, was about like this whole like center around whiteness and like and like Black folks trying to compare themselves to white people, say like, oh, you don't talk white. You know, it's like, oh, I know I'm Black because I don't talk white. Because I feel like that's the reason for saying that, is that there's a distinction between white and Black. And so I just think trying to get that out of our culture would actually help us, you know, propel ourselves forward and like work on the next biggest thing.
Yeah. And I feel like it's even if it continues, it really just is like, okay. And it's one of those things, like, just I feel like being prevail through that, honestly.
Well, yeah, no, I'm not talking about like the effect that it has on the person who's receiving that. I just mean like the mindset that people, that go through by saying that, you know. Because I mean, it's all like it's kind of ingrained. Like people are just saying it without thinking.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that, you know, I always try to open this up so we can learn from you all, so you all can also, we can learn from each other, and you can ask questions or whatever. So if there's any perspectives that you want, let me know. And people are asking, you know, they're giving a lot of questions, which I appreciate. I will say this, man. I think that as somebody that did well in school, and kind of was a square, but I say I was hood adjacent. Like when you went to Emory, it wasn't really that many, just like, thugging wasn't like the thing that was kind of happening. I mean, it was some people that was, you know, getting it in or whatever, but not really like that. But we all were like adjacent to like the stuff. Like we knew, okay, if you're from North Oakland, you probably don't want to be caught up in certain parts of the West if you're not from there, or certain parts of South Berkeley if they having issues. Like these are things that y'all don't even really, it's not even a thing in your life, like in the same way, Jayden. Like it's changed so much. But I will say this is one of the issues though that I have with forced integration. Like I think you should go to whatever school you want to go to, and you should be able to have the resources. But I think that there is something of value to go to a school where you have other folks that look like you and share your culture. Like it's very difficult. And I say that as somebody who went to nothing but Black schools. I went to 11 elementary schools. I moved a lot. Rachel, you don't know this. I was homeless when I was a kid, so I moved around a lot. And but when I got to college, not undergrad, but grad school and my doctoral program, like, you know, it felt like people speak a different language than the language that you speak. There's actual research there, and it'll make you feel crazy, you know. So, Rachel, have there ever been any times where you felt crazy or you know, you have to deal with this double consciousness of not being white enough or not being Black enough or whatnot? I just heard you say that. I just really want to get to the heart of, you know, how that makes you feel. And the reason why I'm pushing this so much, Rachel, is because there's a lot of educators that'll be listening to this and watching this. And how can an adult that's inside that building support students like you?
I mean, I think like the biggest thing is like you know that you're Black at that school. Like especially like during my U.S. history class when we were talking about slavery, I knew that people were staring at me. I could like feel their gaze on me. Or in a lot of my classes, whenever I go in there, there will always be one kid that just looks me up and down for no reason and just makes me feel uncomfortable. So I'm like, is there something on my shirt? Is something on my face? You know, I'm like trying to figure out, but people will just start like looking at me, and I'm just trying to figure out why, and I can. I feel like a part of it has to do with I am, you know, someone that looks out of the ordinary there. And so, you know, like what Jayden was saying earlier, like how, you know, if a white kid gets a compliment, there's, you know, who cares? No one's thinking about it. But as a Black person, I always have to be conscious of my race at that school. You know, like if I'm trying to fit in, I have to be mindful of how I talk, the words I use. Like this is pretty much how I normally talk, but there is some distinction when I hang out with white people versus when I hang out with Black people. And the other thing is that I don't know which one is me or which one I like the authentic me uses, because I switch all the time. I've always had to. And so when I'm talking, you know, it's just kind of like when you go to a job, you talk differently versus when you're at home. And so, yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, like I've said before, is just like I just feel isolated. because I kind of like just normal teenage stuff. Like, I don't know who I am. I don't know like what I want to be in life. Um, I'm just trying to figure everything out. But then when the category of race is put on top of that and trying to figure out where I want to, like the type of people I want to interact with and who I want to be, I have to first figure out who I am as a person. And with race, having complications with figuring out, oh, do I belong with this culture or another one? It's kind of hard to balance. I mean, definitely for myself, having parents, like my mom is super light skinned, probably about the same skin tone as I am. And so she dealt with a lot of this growing up in the inner city of Baltimore. So, because her father was like super light skinned, both of her parents were black, but she was just a fair complexion, and she also had to deal with this. So, just having someone who I trust, who I'm able to talk to, that's also dealt with this, has really helped.
That's what's up, man. Jayden, how you feel about everything that your friend just said? First off, did you know that y'all been friends for a while? I think, right?
Yeah.
Did you know your friend was going through these things or having to kind of juggle these different emotions and these circumstances?
Yeah, we definitely have conversations like this before in which we have talked about like, oh yeah, because we hang out and like some of my goofy Emory friends said this about her, like, oh yeah, you talk like. So we had a huge conversation about that, a productive one too. And so like I didn't know to this extent, and I didn't really. It's good that she's going into detail about how exactly it's like when she has to, switch up the language she uses. So I am actually learning stuff about her in this conversation that I didn't know before. But yeah, we've had similar conversations to this. But yeah.
Well, I'll say this, man. God bless you both. I think that y'all are just amazing young folks. I think that the way that y'all think and where your mind state is so much more advanced than where mine was. And I was a pretty good kid. Like, I actually did a lot of things as a young person and was an activist, like starting in high school and through college, and it shaped a lot of my life. But just I think the thoughtfulness that you brought today, Rachel, and how you discuss it, I think it's really valuable. So in this little bit of time we got left before we do the behind the scenes reflection, and Rachel, you can be part of that with us. It's something we always do for people out there. What solutions do you have? And I don't know if pre and post COVID kind of fit into it. I actually think that with COVID, it gives us an excuse and a way to actually come back and do things different. So with these type of issues in these schools that may be integrated or forced integration or whatnot, Rachel, do you have any solutions that you suggest? And just throw it out there and let's see if some people can pick it up and run with it. Or maybe you can be that change.
Yeah, no, definitely. I don't know about Jayden's school, but my school and a lot of other private schools in, specifically Oakland, but I mean anywhere, and also a lot of colleges have started these pages called Black at the school name. So mine is Black at College Prep, and pretty much on the post, it's anonymous. So you can post stories that you've experienced at college prep, of just like what it's like being like a Black student there, and like different types of racism or I guess discrimination that you face there. And I think with COVID, since you have more time to reflect on yourself, because it's not like the 9 to 5 every day, constant hustle. Now it's like, oh, I don't have a job, or oh, my work's from home, so I can relax and not have to wake up as early. You can actually start to reflect and think about, hey, like there's issues at our school. And so, yeah, so the account has been recognized by the administrators, and they've released a couple of statements about things that are going to do. And yes, I mean, definitely their responses weren't as quite good as I would have liked them to be, but it's a start. And I think having a conversation about it is the best thing that anyone could do. Have a conversation about it, maybe start an outreach program to kids in lower income families that are unable to pay the tuition at college prep, so they are selected to get the quality of education and just work from there.
That's what's up, man. What about you, Jayden? You got any solutions?
For for me, it's really just like it's a lot of cultural issues at Emory. I feel like in terms of there's a lot of black, brown, Mexican people. There's definitely different lanes in those groups, in those different demographics. I feel like it's definitely a cultural thing in terms of you act white or whatever, you talk white. I feel like that's definitely a cultural thing. But in terms of solutions and like what we can do, I guess we can just like have deeper conversations like in our communities, like such as this, and really just like figure out like why do we think that in the first place? Like where did that come from? Why do we think that? We need to get into the mindset of the person to say something like that. You know what I mean? And see like what is the root of something like that and how it can be changed, or it can't at all. So that's one of the solutions. In terms of I still feel like my school can better instruct students of color. I still feel like that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we should definitely, like my school, should definitely research and figure out different ways to, engage, students of color, or just students in general in my school, honestly.
Beautiful. Oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's fine. I was finished. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's beautiful. I think just listening to you all, I think that it's important to have representation at these schools, and not that just because you share race with somebody that y'all got the same culture, because that's not true. Mm-hmm. However, it does. People need to, be able to see a mirror of themselves. I think I read on Twitter, somebody did this whole thing around schools should be a mirror, not just windows, basically, where you kind of outside looking in versus like being able to see yourself reflected. Rachel, it sounds like you have an incredible family. It sounds like your mother has been great. I would also, and you might have done this, but I will also seek out some mentors that kind of have grown up that way, dealt with the same stuff. And private schools tend to be good with that around lineage and being able to connect you with other alum. I think for Jayden, Jayden and I grew up in the same neighborhood. We went to the same school. For all intents and purposes, we're pretty much a similar kid, just in two different eras of like, I mean, if I was born at the same time Jayden was, Jayden, I think I'd be very similar to you. Not really like, always been a really good kid, but you know how to handle yourself and with different types of people and know how to stay out the way and all that stuff, but know how to assert yourself because you do so much. I'm going to make this statement real quick to adults. And I need adults to really listen up. And I'm going to mark it right now so I can come back to this moment on the video and put it out there. Adults, these young people have given you a gift. You've just kind of really been blessed with an understanding of how kids are seeing themselves portrayed at certain schools, whether those schools be mostly Black or mostly white, and being a Black student in that setting. And I think that, sometimes if we're not talking to you or doing a PD or using like all this other kind of language that educators use, sometimes these messages go over your head. What these young people just said, both of them, it was kind of heartbreaking for me, even in how honest and real it was. And I don't think it was necessarily heartbreaking for you all to say it, but it was heartbreaking in the sense of it's something that's so clear as day that young people can just kind of name it and call it out. Whereas adults are spending way too much time trying to put a name on something as opposed to fixing it and supporting these young people. So listen, like we say, we want to listen to our community. We say we want to hear from young people, listen to them in very plain language. This is how I'm made to feel at my school. College prep is a really good academic school. Like it is very good. And there are parents that have to make a decision around, look, we're going to sacrifice some things on this social side. And my daughter may struggle here, but she's going to leave with a grade A top education. Whereas at Emory, I got a lot culturally and I love being there and I love my friends and playing ball, but I didn't leave in the best academic shape. I'm gonna just be real with you. I graduated with a really high GPA, but I was still remedial everything when I went to college, right? And it shouldn't have to be an either or. It shouldn't have to be, damn, I got to go to this type of school if I want to have friends and feel accepted and have fun, or I got to go to this type of school if I want to actually leave with a valuable education that's high ranking. I'm not saying that our education isn't valuable at Emory, Jayden. I don't, because somebody will take that and twist it. I just want to make a call to adults to hear what these young people are saying. And y'all have had to make some really adult choices at 14 years old, right? Which is kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. So with that being said, people, please show Rachel some support. Please show Jayden some support. We should have put your Cash App in there, Rachel, so people could like support you. Jayden is a young entrepreneur. He is not just doing this out of the kindness of his heart, even though he enjoys it and loves it. If you got some value and if you actually like what he had to say, his Cash App is right there. Whether you want to put $1 or $100 in there, that's up to you. And this is not begging. You got a service. The same way you pay for HBO, I think Jayden just gave you something that's of that value, if not more. Rachel, you are just amazing to have on, and you represent yourself so well. And I think that you speak in a way that includes so many people, and you're so thoughtful in your delivery. I'm not doing the thing where, oh, you speak so good. It's not one of those things. I think that you are a very thoughtful young person. I was not that thoughtful as a young person. I'm not that thoughtful today. Let me just go ahead and be honest. So Jayden and Rachel, you are so much better than me. You are so much better than me. And I just want to show love and gratitude and appreciation for your parents. And Jayden, I know it's your parents and your grandparents that raised you. Now we're about to go into the behind the scenes part. This is like the show is like over, but we're going to keep rolling because this is also a learning tool. This is a learning space for Jayden, who produces, who writes, and who hosts this show with me. And so Jayden, man, we did not necessarily plan the show to do that. We planned for it to be a pre-COVID, post-COVID, your school environment talk, but it was just some other important topics that came up, and I think you did a good job of just rolling with it. So how did you feel about the turn that this episode took?
I feel like it took a very necessary turn, you know? I feel like, yeah, these are conversations, again, that our community needs and our culture needs to have. So, you know, I really like that turn. I feel like, yeah, like you said earlier, COVID is giving us a chance to come back better instead of the same or worse. So I feel like conversations about like how we should come back and what we've experienced before COVID are very important.
Rachel, how about you? How did you feel about, you know, the turn and just being a part of the show again? Like, how did it feel to be here? Were you comfortable? Did we do enough to make you feel comfortable?
Oh yeah, of course. I love being on this podcast again. Thank you, Jayden, for inviting me. I also do think that the turn that this episode took was also definitely necessary. I think it's good to not only look at ways to improve the community, but also, you know, where the community falls behind and different ways that, you know, we can go forward and make it a better place.
Man, I appreciate hearing that. I think, and the interesting part for me was, again, on Sunday, the show that we're doing is about this topic, right? About kids being caught acting white or whatever. And again, I'm not supposed to be there. Like, I'm actually supposed to be taking like the weekend off. But, you know, once you kind of went there, I wanted to keep it going so I could cut this up and send it to the fellas and potentially get you on to speak just from your perspective. I just think that it's really important for educators to actually hear from young people. I don't think, here's the real, let me be honest with y'all, okay? Most schools and most like educational organizations or whatever, they'll have something where they say they want parent voice or they want student voice, but it's almost like to check a box. It's like, oh, that's cute. You know what I mean? Right? Like, and I don't think people actually take advantage of it when young people tell them something. And I think that y'all told people, what y'all did today should be part of PD. Like, and if people want it, let us know and I'll cut it up and we'll send it to you. Like, adults and people that run schools and run classrooms should have to listen to this and like really reflect on it. Because you both are kind of like mild-mannered. Y'all are like, you know, respectful or whatnot. But these issues don't normally come out like that, right? They normally come out in a bit of rage. They normally come out after somebody's felt silenced or, you know, or it turns into a hashtag, like you just said, Rachel, where it's like Black at College Prep or whatever. And at that point, it's hard to have dialogue because there's so much anger and hurt at that point. So I just hope adults actually listen and kind of take this to heart, because that feels rough. I felt that when I was in college. I felt it in grad school. Like, I know what it means when it's like a Black issue that comes up in my grad program, and like everybody kind of is like listening to hear what you say. Like, okay, well, let's now Rachel got to represent all Black people everywhere. You know what I'm saying? And that's a lot of pressure. So, Rachel, I think what I did fail in, though, is I wanted to get a better sense of, does that put extra pressure on you? And I didn't really get to the pressure question for you. But what would you gauge a level of pressure from on 1 to 10, 10 being extreme and kind of dangerous? And how do you deal with that?
I mean, it depends. Like, academically, there's like, I think it's always at a solid 6, like kind of above average, but not like too crazy, just because I know that whatever's given to me, I will find some way to make it work. I'm confident in my academic abilities to be able to say that. But when it comes to socially, it's kind of like an 8, 7, 8, somewhere up there. And I think that's the majority of the time, because I'm always worried about the perception that people have of me, or, how my teachers view me, because I'll never know how someone's able to think. I'll never know, how they're feeling about me unless they were to tell me. And it's just constantly saying like, oh, are they friends with me because they feel like they have to be? Are they, talking to me because they want something from me? Was I only accepted into school because of my race? There's always questions like that I keep asking myself that I know that I shouldn't, but it's kind of hard to just, not think about.
Man, that's wild, man. Rachel, I think you did an amazing job. Jayden, I'm always just so proud of you, man. And again, like, you are like me before like life mistakes. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think, I think, but one thing I want to say to you, Jayden, as you start to get more attention, as you do this work, I never want you to feel like unnecessary pressure, bro. You get to live a full life. And I shared this on a different show and different podcasts, but I want to share it here. Somebody in my book club said this, one of my OGs, and he said, you can't enroll in a class called wisdom. Like, life has to be lived in order for you to gain wisdom, and that stuff will come. And bro, I wish for you to be able to do all the things you want to do, which you have been doing. Like, don't let survivor's guilt, survivor's remorse, don't let like overthinking, don't let imposter syndrome and none of that stuff take your joy, bro. You are right. You are beyond where you need to be at this moment. And I would say keep going. And Rachel, I don't know you as well, but just from what I've seen and heard from you so far, I would tell you the same thing. And if you want, there are some there are probably some powerful women that were watching this show and may have fallen in love with you. I see that Miss Hunt has fallen in love with you. And I think that most people that do, if you all want to kind of reach out to her around mentorship or something like that, just off the strength, I would say, reach out and Jayden can connect you if that's what Rachel kind of wants to do. I think that y'all are just amazing, and I'm blessed to be able to share this with you all. Jayden, we are coming up on your shows, man. Now listen, after the 5th show, you can keep going. It's just kind of training wheels coming off. So at that point, though, right, I might be able to join sometimes, but I'm going to not join on all of them. But that means that you need to understand how the full platform works, bringing people in and out, and prepping your guests, man. But you've been doing magnificent.
Thanks.
But yeah, for the people that's listening, the reason why we do this last part is because I think there's a lot of science that goes into teaching and educating. And I think that should be true. I think those are things that happen. But also, man, I think people just need to see genuine love and mentorship kind of happening in the moment, and tough love. Jayden, there's not many things I wouldn't do for you, man. And I'm going to correct you when you need correcting. But I think that we've built enough of a relationship, and I've shown up consistently enough to where, you respect it when I have to kind of push on you on certain things. So is there anything that either of you want to say just to close out? Y'all have a captive audience. So Jayden, I'll start with you. And I'll let Rachel take us out since she's our guest. So Jayden, what do you want to leave people with?
Yeah. Just first off, thank you everybody for tuning in to this podcast. I really appreciate it. I know Rachel and Charles does too. But if you guys were to take something away, really just like, yeah, take away Rachel's perspective, like, because there are definitely like a lot of people in her position. Definitely take away like her perspective, what she said. Put that in context for like the rest of the state or whatever, the country, and really I want you guys to really like pay attention and really engage in these conversations and really share them and expand these conversations to where it can make a very significant impact. But again, if you guys enjoy, I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks you.
That's what's up. Oh, and Jayden, see this, just so I wanted to put this up. You, as a producer, you have a national audience, so there are people outside of California watching this. So just know when you talk about times and stuff, you see how even in the background we say 12 p.m. Pacific. Gotcha. So for East Coast people, that's 3 o'clock. So you got to make sure that when you advertising and posting,
gotcha.
Make sure you tell people the time zones, or we just need to play it twice or whatever. Rachel, take us out. What do you have for these people? Give us some wisdom. You've just been killing it all day. Let's get full screen for this. Go ahead.
I think the biggest thing, and I think this definitely goes back to what you said, Charles, but like with worries and rough times, like they're always going to come, and no matter what happens, you can't let yourself get caught up in that and just continue to just kind of push it to the side or not deal with it, because life is pretty short. We don't actually you go to school for 18 years and then you got to work and then you retire when you're 60, and you only have 20 years to really enjoy yourself. So I guess the thing that I want everyone to take away from this is that do the most that you can in the situation that you have now. Don't just put things off. If you can do something, go travel or go see a family member, you should do it as soon as you can.
Mm-hmm. With that being said, you guys, thank you so much. Y'all are amazing. And this has been another episode of Youth Life during COVID-19. Jayden, say bye to your people, and then I'll take us out.
All right, y'all. Have a good day. But again, tune in 12 Pacific, noon Pacific time next week. We're gonna have another episode. Probably gonna have Elijah back on, or both Elijah and Rachel, because I like having those conversations too. But
we don't have to play Rachel, man. We keep bringing her on. We got you, Rachel.
Yeah.
Y'all have a good one, and we'll see y'all next week. Peace.
All right.